upstairs.
I'm up there.
Do you fancy a game of chess tonight? Game of chess? No. Oh, no hands either, sorry. Didn't notice. Arm wrestling? No. Do they have any pretty Daleks? Oh, you're playing for sympathy now, aren't you? All right, everyone, on the way out, be nice to him. He has no friends. There, he's there. Someone's been nice to you.
Excuse me. Wouldn't be the first time.
Got a rather tedious line in repartee, hasn't he? You will be exterminated. That was quite good.
That was good.
Yeah. Oh, my existence is justified at last. Oh, there's a very strange dressed young man down there. I thought we'd passed that stage. I got rid of him, I thought. It's a hard knock life, all of us. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Should we go?
Yes.
All right.
So I want to start with the question I usually start with when I do these interviews. What's your earliest memory of Doctor Who? Because presumably, growing up in the UK, you would have watched it at some point.
Yes. Sadly, when it started, I was already grown up. I was studying law in London. I was sharing a flat with 5 other future lawyers. There were 6 of us. I'm good at maths, you see. And I'd been out somewhere, heaven knows where, on the afternoon of the 23rd of November 1963, which was the day that you lost your President Kennedy. And that was the same day, within 24 hours, of Doctor Who starting. I came into my flat, and we were a basement flat, and we came in at ground level onto a kind of the top of the stairs, which went down into the big room, which was the flat itself. And I took off my coat and hung it over the rail, stair rail. And as I did, this program came up. So I leaned on the baluster rail and started watching the very first episode of Doctor Who. And 27 minutes later, when it finished, I was still there. I hadn't even come down the stairs and sat down, because it was riveting. And my flatmates and I were just astounded. Now, I know when you look at that first episode of Doctor Who, you think, how could it's so, the sets are shaky, you know, in old black and white. But at that time, that was state-of-the-art television. That was really a #1 television. It's only because when you look back at it and think, what? I thought that was good. You kind of post-justify by saying, oh yes, well I liked the shaky sets. No, you didn't. You didn't notice because all the sets were shaky then. You just bought the story, which I did.
Even the big budget Shakespeare productions that the BBC was doing at the time had the same production values.
Yeah.
The thing is, people are still watching Doctor Who today and not the Age of Kings.
Well, Shakespeare's done quite well.
They're not watching a Shakespeare production from 1960, let me rephrase that.
That's because they've done lots more since then.
That is very true.
And in fact, they were very good, those Shakespeare
Yes, they were.
I'm sorry, there are some visions that... There's a gentleman sitting behind you who is now not your best friend. And turn around and look at him. Don't annoy him. Yeah, so that was me. That was the first episode of Doctor Who. And I made a point, because then you couldn't record programmes.
Right.
So you either saw it when it went out, or you didn't see it. And I think I probably managed to see all of Hartnell, most of Troughton. And then by the time the 70s came along, I was an actor myself, and most theatre productions are on Saturdays as well as every other day, with 2 shows usually at 5 o'clock, 7:30, so that was the end of my Doctor Who watching days. But it was a programme certainly that I mean, it was so far ahead of its time and so different to everything else. We take it for granted now, but back then it was phenomenal.
Well, let's flash forward to the early 1980s then.
Oh, I'm getting dizzy. Go on.
Well, something you have in common with the current Dr. Peter Capaldi is that you actually appeared in the show before you were cast as the Doctor. So I want to ask you about playing the head of the Time Lord Guards, Maxwell, in a Peter Davison story called Arc of Infinity.
Well, I was doing a play in Brighton on the south coast of England, and I got a phone call from my agent saying, the Doctor Who people had been on the phone. I said, oh, they want to play Doctor Who. He said, don't be silly. I said, no, there's a nice part, it's in 3 episodes. Maxwell, he's a guard. I said, oh, that means I'll never be Doctor Who. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I read somewhere that when they're casting Doctor Who, they don't ever look at people who have been in the show in another role. So it won't be me. He said, well, they're not going to ask you to do Doctor Who, are they? He's still my agent. So I said, you're right, and the dates, the filming dates, fitted in perfectly with the work I was doing. So I kind of resigned myself to never being the Doctor and turned up at rehearsals for Arc of Infinity with him. And he wasn't quite as interesting as you. And enjoyed it enormously. I got on very well with Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton, and we had a few laughs. And the way of making Doctor Who back then was that you rehearsed for a week, like doing a stage play. And at the end of that week, you ran the whole thing in a rehearsal room, and the producer and the first cameraman and lighting people stood and watched as you did all the various bits. And afterwards we all went out for lunch and came back and were given notes on how to do it better, or changes and things like that. And we came back the afternoon of the run-through of Arc of Infinity, and John Nathan Turner came up to me and said, what's this programme called? I said, don't you know? It's Doctor Who. He said, yeah, it's not Maxwell the Guard then. I said, no. He said, you're acting a bit as if you're the most important person there. And I said, well, we all are. In our own lives, you know, every one of you is watching the rest of us in the same way as I'm watching you. From inside you, and you will walk out of here, and you're still you. Just because I'm a guard on Gallifrey, and I think the Doctor is a twerp, there's no reason why I have to not let that be very clearly known. And he said, yeah, I take your point, but he said, if you could leave a little screen space for Peter, it would be nice. And I was doing a lot of examining the fingernails and registering my contempt for this minor irritant who was the Doctor.
You also shot him at one point.
Well, that wasn't the script. That wasn't a random action of mine. I was called upon to, at the end of one episode, I shot him, you know. Oh dear, is he dead? No, of course he's not, because he's in next week's episode, see? We all like to have those moments of, oh, could he be dead? Could he be dead? And he wasn't. I had stunned him, so I could arrest him and take him away and kill him. But anyway, as a result of the conversation I had with John Nathan Turner, during which we laughed a lot, I have to say, he was making his point, but he thought it was funny. And I've always quite liked looking at the humorous side of things. But the result was that he and I got on very well. And I behaved myself. And I like to think that when you see it, you don't see an unnaturally large performance. There was the joy of my hat, of course, which I don't know if any of you know about. I see something I like the look of there, a coffee person. Are you bringing coffee in the general direction of someone you like? You're allowed up here, but you have to turn around and make a speech now. No. Is that for me?
That's for you.
You know I love you, don't you? Thank you. She's a barista. You should do the barista's dance.
You don't want to see that either.
No. Oh, it smells good. In a minute I'm going to ask you a very long question, so that I can drink this. There was the question of the hat. Do you know the story? Some of you might. They gave me a very large hat for the leader of the guard, with a great big feather on it, a huge plume. And in the very first scene, they insisted that I wore it. They wanted me to wear it all the way through.
Right.
But this vile hat was so huge, and I did it in the first scene, it was very uncomfortable. In the second scene, we had to walk through several doorways, all of which would have nearly decapitated me, let alone the hat. So they, after seeing scenes of me doing that to get through the doors, they said, all right, take the hat off, take the hat off. So, but I then had to carry it. So, because you have, when things like that happen in a film, you have to see the action of the change, otherwise people say, he had a hat on in that scene, didn't have it in the next. So you have to see me take it off and carry it under my arm. And under my arm, with the feather bent over, it looked like a chicken. So I gave the chicken a name. I think it was Esmeralda. And everyone on the set knew that my hat was Esmeralda the chicken. So I was always going, just so that the microphones couldn't pick it up, but I'm afraid the acting was good. So you had implacable Maxwell, who never smiled, with his talking chicken going around. In other words, I was quite badly behaved. But the atmosphere was nice, we had a laugh. So Maxwell and his chicken made an impression, really. And a few weeks later, I was invited to the wedding of the girl who had been the floor manager on that recording, who I got on very well with. And John Nathan Turner was there as well. And we spent a delightful afternoon making each other laugh. And bless his heart, he says that Peter Davison had said he wanted to go, and John at that moment thought, I know, I want to take over from him. So by accepting the part that I thought wouldn't let me play the Doctor, I got to play the Doctor. So never ever. Young ones out there, never, ever, ever think something can't happen to you. If you'd said to me when I was 8 years old that I'd ever drive a car, go in an aeroplane. Aeroplanes were not things for boys from where I came from to go to a foreign country and maybe. If you told me that one day I would drive the Isle of Wight ferry from Southampton to the Isle of Wight, if you told me that I would land a jumbo jet at Haifa airport, sitting in the captain's seat, all because of TV series I've been in. I can give you a list of stuff. And playing one of the most iconic characters ever seen on television. If you told me that when I was 11, I think I'd have imploded. It was just unthinkable. To be an actor would have been unthinkable. Because, you know, once a year we might go and see a theatre show somewhere, and I just thought it was magic. And here I am now doing it. And if you told me when I was at school that I would happily sit on a stage like this and talk to a room full of people without going bright red and crying I wouldn't believe that either. So, never rule anything out. All things are possible. Even for you. Long question.
So you're cast in the part, you're midway through filming the first season. The big reason I'm asking this is we do have Fraser Hines here, and you got to...
Do we? Oh, we get rid of him.
Well, you've been stuck with him for about 30 years now, because it was, earlier this year was the 30th anniversary of a story called The Two Doctors, where you appeared not just with Fraser, but with Patrick Troughton.
Ah, now you're talking. The governor, that's what I call him. If it hadn't been for Patrick Troughton, well, none of us would be here. Because if they hadn't employed a genius to be the second Doctor, to establish the first regeneration, a man whose acting ability was, he was just a brilliant character actor. And he turned the character of the Doctor through 360 degrees, flipped it over 17 times, and landed with this wonderful, oblique character of this little cosmic hobo. I just thought it was wonderful. And because of him, we got up to number 12. If number 2 hadn't been as good. So when people say to me, "You're not my favourite Doctor," I forgive them if they say, "My favourite was Patrick Troughton." They do say that, you know. I hear people come out saying, "Now, you're not my favourite Doctor. In fact, my favourite's John Pertwee." And number 2, it's a toss-up between Sylvester McCoy and Tom Baker. And I really like Peter Davison. So, you're kind of 4th or 5th. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, Christopher Eccleston's 4th. Thank you. That's kind. The other one that happens is that when I'm sitting at a table, never at a Doctor Who event like this, I hasten to add, but at some of those Comic-Cons, I've got my pictures lying there on the table, and waiting for anyone to come up and ask for an autograph. And it's usually a young male of about 8 or 9 who comes up, looks at the picture, looks at me. Is that Colin Baker? When's he coming? I'm afraid I go, "I don't know, he's always late." It's the only way to get out of that, isn't it? It's me. Well, I do sometimes say, "What does your dad look like now? And what did your dad look like 30 years ago?" "Oh, yeah." So please don't do it to me this weekend.
I mean, this is something I'm always curious about as an amateur actor myself, but working in films and television, and on something as iconic as Doctor Who, do you find it strange that people still recognize you for something you acted in, at this point, almost 30 years ago?
Not strange, no. It's charming. I mean, gosh, how lucky we are in this job. There's something about being in your home. We've been in your home. There's a box in the corner, which is slowly getting bigger and bigger and better definition. And on that you see people. And some of whom you like, you identify with, you want to see week after week. And then you get to see them in real life somewhere. I'm the same. You know, if I meet somebody, as I do at some of these events, I was at one where, oh God, my memory of names is appalling. The series was Breaking Bad, which I loved. I watched all of Breaking Bad and loved it. And the guy who played the chap who owned the coffee shops, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but what's his name?
The chicken store?
Chicken, yeah. Gus. The guy, thank you. Glad you came. The guy who played Gus was signing autographs. I thought, I've got to go and say hello to him. And I went up to say hello, and I said, "Look, you don't know who I am, I played." He said, "Oh, I've seen on you." And I said, I just thought your performance was fantastic. I love this series. And I got all fanboyish. And he suddenly stood up and said, shut your eyes. Right, turn round. Turn round, and I did. And he came out from behind his table and came down the other side. He said, where are you up to now in England? And I said, oh, series, whatever it was. And he said, yeah, I thought so. Don't look at my pictures on the table. Because there were some pictures of what happened later. It was spoiled, which I thought was wonderful. I've never thought of doing it, mind you, nothing much happens to me in Doctor Who. But what a lovely man, but I was a bit tongue-tied, because I was meeting someone that I thought was brilliant. I still feel, you know, especially when I'm with my family, who have no respect for me whatsoever, and a total stranger will come up and go, who is you? And they're all going, he's not all that. It's a rare privilege. I mean, there are people who've done a lot more for you in your lives that deserve the kind of respect that you give actors you've seen on television. You know, that teacher that way back in the mist of time taught you to write properly, and that, you know, you wouldn't seek them out 30 years later and get their autograph, which perhaps you should. All I've done is turn up every week, do a job I love, got paid for it, and I get this as well. It's just a remarkable bonus. And you can understand why some actors whose brains are slightly smaller than their checks think somehow it makes them different or better or special and behave poorly. And you will meet some of them in the course of your lives. Certainly if you go to the bigger Comic-Cons, there are one or two there. And there are far more who are lovely, but there are one or two who really do think that they are something more special than they actually are. So it's quite hard to maintain a degree of self-awareness, shall we say. But I'm lucky. I take the work seriously. When I'm doing the work, that is serious. Even though I enjoy it and I have fun, in between takes I may mess around a little, but when we're actually doing the work, I'm focused on it. But I don't take it seriously beyond the fact that it matters so much to so many people. And the other lucky thing that I get, that people in most jobs don't get, is I get people doing things like an author that I revere, whose name I'm not going to remember for a moment or two, who wrote the Thomas Covenant books.
Stephen R.
Donaldson, Stephen Donaldson. I met him at a convention, and I went all kind of, well, Stephen Donaldson. And it turned out he was a Sixth Doctor fan, not just Doctor Who. He liked my Doctor. And he dedicated a book to me. One of his books he dedicated to me. Now that is kind of jaw-droppingly wonderful. When I wrote a book, funny enough, I don't know why, by chance, I dedicated it to 3 of my teachers. I wrote a book which will be coming out again soon, by the way, so it's out of publication at the moment. A book called Gallimorphy, not Gallifrey, Gallimorphy, short stories. Watch my website, Colin Online, for news and publication. And I dedicated it to my primary school teacher, my English teacher, and my Greek teacher, funny enough, because those are the ones that made me love words. And those are the people that matter. One generation, sorry, I'm like a dragonfly dipping about. One generation of good teaching could change the world. And that's the awful truth. People who feel that they are allowed to be the people they should be. And we can do that if we invest money in education. Why don't they do it?
We're paying our football players.
There you go. Donald will do it for you. I'll take my toe rapidly out of that water.
Moving swiftly on. You were talking about your writing there, and something I do want to ask you about is you actually stand out from all the other doctors in another way because you are the only doctor to have also written licensed Doctor Who fiction.
True?
And what I want to ask you about is a graphic novel you wrote called Age of Chaos.
Yeah.
What was that experience like to go from playing the Sixth Doctor on screen to then writing for not just him, but his comic companion, Frobisher?
Yeah, that was because I've been writing stuff. I write an article each week for a newspaper, but that's not fiction, of course. And I always thought I had it in me, and I can't remember how it initiated, but it was the then editor of Doctor Who magazine.
Gary Russell, I think.
It was Gary Russell, wasn't it? Thank you, I don't hear. You could answer your own question, really.
I am nerd, hear me more.
I love nerds. I wish I'd been allowed to be a nerd when I was little. I would have been a nerd. I used to buy comic books every Saturday. I was brought up in a town called Rochdale in the north of Manchester, went on like that. And I used to go out to the covered market in the middle of Rochdale every Saturday morning with my pocket money and buy a comic. And the comics I would buy would either be cowboy comics, Oblong Cassidy, Lash LaRue, who was Tom Mix, it was a long time ago. Or, when they came out, the early Captain Marvel was my favourite. And they haven't made films about him yet, have they?
I don't think they have. I think
Shazam!
it's in the works, but they haven't made a film yet.
Oh wow! Is that DC or is that...
That's DC, yeah.
That's DC. I used to love Captain Marvel. What was he called? Toby Batson? Billy Batson.
Yeah.
Billy Batson. I've thought about that for years. And I used to lose myself in those, but if there had been the internet and games and things when I was a 6-year-old, I don't think you'd have seen me. I'd have been proto-geek, proto-nerd. You're lucky people, especially you young ones, especially the fezzy heads. Fezzy heads who are nodding off. This boring man is talking a lot. So yes, Gary Russell said, do you fancy writing one? And I said, well, not having done it, how do you do it? He said, it's like writing a film script. So basically what you do is it's like you're storyboarding a film. You tell the artist basically what the point of view is, from above we see, and he comes in from there and he does that and he does that, and then you write the dialogue as well. And I greatly enjoyed the process, and I've been frustrated by Nicola Bryant Perry's demise in the show. And even when we were doing it, I said, is this true? I mean, did she go off with Iarkanos? Or have I been told that to shut me up? What happened with the mind probe? Was my head done in by the mind probe, so I was actually being horrible to her? Or did I pretend to be horrible because I knew I was being watched? Or did it never happen because the Matrix was lying? Those of you who have followed the end of Trial of the Time Lord will know what I'm talking about. And so I thought I'd resolve it myself. And I wrote about what happened to, and I took the ludicrous path of her having gone off with King Iarkanos. And I'm happy to say that Big Finish have corrected my interesting but valiant attempt to explain otherwise with my final regeneration scene, which has been now recorded on Big Finish. So I'm afraid Sylvester McCoy is no longer an illegitimate doctor, which he has been for 30 years. Because lying in my coat and wriggling about like a Scottish twerp does not make a regeneration, in my opinion.